I'm Vince Lindenmeyer, and this is a special topic that we're talking about today with our experts from AdLab. And Ty Fussell is from Austin, Texas, and I've worked with him personally through some nonprofit initiatives and for-profit. And we got to talking one day about the fact that a lot of nonprofits will really wing it the first year or so, the first second year or so, the first third year or so. They'll get their own logo, they'll whip up a website, and then about year two or three, they start to really stagnate. And we realize that, hey, you're about to get to the next level. Maybe it's your brand, maybe it's stale, maybe it's stagnant, and maybe we need to take a look at revitalizing your brand so you can get to the next level. And as I explored this topic with Ty, we thought, yeah, what about a nonprofit brand wellness checkup? So we've gotten this far, and we're recording this for those that aren't able to make it because it is a special topic, breaking news. Wolf Blitzer in the Situation Room. Here we are. You have a brand, you're stagnant, and you need this bad. So again, Ty Fussell's out of Austin, and Adrian, yes, you're probably out of Austin too, because you graduated from University of Texas at Austin. We have two colors of orange. I saw Ty graduated from University of Tennessee, so that's another color of orange. And I grew up in Clemson, South Carolina, so that's a color of orange. The neatest thing about Ty is not only is he a father, but he's a grandfather now. I've seen the pictures, and he's a studier of metaphysics, which the word quantum entanglement has been popping up all over the place now. I think when I say it, my phone hears it, and then all of a sudden I get another thing about quantum entanglement. So now that we're doing this presentation here, we're now quantumly entangled forever. And Adrian, thank you for being here. I'm glad Ty invited you. I'm really excited about your Google AdWord and Facebook advertising expertise, and as well as social media marketing and email lead generation. I mean, you're the SEO expert, and I can see you guys are a dynamic duo. So without any further ado, we got nonprofit leaders that may have a stagnant brand. What do we do?
Well, all right. Well, first, thanks for allowing us to speak to you guys today, and thanks for the introductions, Vince. Yeah, I'm Ty, and yeah, Adrian will be kind of popping in here over the course of this presentation, just to kind of make everybody aware of what we're talking about when we say brand wellness for nonprofits. So as Vince mentioned, we did kind of put together a package that would help nonprofit organizations just so we can review where they stand and how their brand is looking today. And so that's not exactly what we're really going to get to right now. We can touch on that at the end, but we're just going to talk about what do we mean when we're talking about brand wellness. So that kind of starts. We've created three sections for this, and the first one is understanding brand wellness, just kind of generally. So what does it mean? What does it mean for organizations like yours? Well, of course, it can mean lots of things, many of which we're going to get through and distill today through our chat. But we're specifically, what does it mean right up front? Well, it means, how is your brand positioned to face the public? Is your messaging on point? Your messaging leads to inspiration, we hope, for your consumers, for your donors, your volunteers. Inspiration for them is to act exactly how you would like them to. So that's key, right? We want that to happen, and if that's not happening exactly the way we like it to, then there's room for improvement. Does your visual content connect with your intended audience? Are you meeting your audience where they are? Via the right vehicles, media, channels, timing. And there's a whole bunch of other things that we intend to get throughout this presentation. So We could talk about the connections between your brand clarity and your stakeholder engagement. So what does that mean? As far as brand clarity goes, messaging is a crucial factor here, and it must honestly, really, the most important component for your messaging, believe it or not, is empathy. Understanding your stakeholders' needs and their goals is absolutely necessary to get them engaged with you and your mission. Is your messaging trustworthy? Because if it's not, then you're not connecting with your stakeholders. What actions are you having them take? We call this the CTA, the call to action. So these calls to action should live within all of your communication pieces. Is there a connection between your brand and what you're asking them to do? What is it that you want your audience to do exactly? It's important to be as clear as possible about this. So we're going to get into how your branding supports donor confidence and retention, volunteer recruitment, community trust, and recognition. So first, like we said, your communications need to be super clear. They need to be succinct and action oriented. Too much beating around the bush and we will lose our readers and therefore potential donors and volunteers. So not only is it about the message and the communication, but how is it presented? We need to have good looking art direction, good looking design. This is crucial for legitimacy, right? And respectability. If your communication pieces don't look professional, then the people seeing them will assume that you're not professional. It's really that simple. So look smart by having a clean, tidy, professional appearance. And also know your audience. Understanding their drivers and their motivators is super important. Understand what they will respond to favorably. And furthermore, respect them. A lot of people don't remember to respect their audience, and they want to spell out every single detail, and people get irritated by that. So if your audience is smart, we want to treat them as such. And then they will repay you with action, donations, volunteering, or whatever your call to actions may be. And then what we really want ultimately is if we want the audience to be able to summarize your organization's purpose or your unique selling proposition. It'd be really nice if they could do that. If they could feed back to you exactly the things that you're training them to think about you, then we kind of won a big uphill battle. And then finally, and this is maybe the more controversial approach, but is polarization worth considering? Believe it or not, pissing some people off, if you stake a flag in the ground and you upset some people, that might be a good thing because that means on the other end of the spectrum, you're getting some people who are really, really hot for that stake you put in the ground. And those people, we can say that we turn them from fans of your brand into brand fanatics. And brand fanatics like to do word of mouth, and that's a super effective and very cost-effective means of marketing, right? So we get these guys, it's basically a free street team supporting your organization. So we don't always want to do polarization, but there are opportunities where that can happen where we create these fanatics. All right, signs your nonprofit brand needs attention. Well, what about Vince touched on that at the beginning. So what if your materials haven't been updated in years? If they appear dated, then you may not be taken very seriously. Now, what percentage of your emails are being opened? A low percentage would be a pretty good sign that your brand needs some updating. Maybe they are being opened, but they're not being responded to, or your responses have been dipping. Maybe the responses that you used to get were very passionate, but now that has waned. Maybe you're having a hard time developing fresh social media content. You've been saying the same kinds of things over and over. These are all great signs that your brand might need some attention. Some more signs. Is your audience responding favorably to your messages? Are you getting engagement from them on any level? And kind of like we mentioned a minute ago, your audience awareness and comprehension, can they replay your mission and goals back to you? Or can they pinpoint what's unique about your organization? These are just simple things we know that if we're doing it right, then they can do those things. Are they engaging with your brand exactly how you had hoped? What measures are you taking to track all this? I mean, a lot of people are putting messaging out, but they're not even tracking it. So that's something that's these days is not so hard to do, and we can get very granular with the information we're getting. So then our next section is key components of brand assessment, and Adrian's going to take over for the first part here.
Yeah, so as we kind of go through, like, what are the components when you're assessing your brand, a lot of it feels like it really stems off of your website, but it's actually pretty effective across different areas of communication for your nonprofit, because when you're thinking about it, your communication, most of it is outside of your four walls, right? You're not really communicating uh, specifically internally, but we're looking more of external communication. So we're talking things like websites, apps, emails, text messages, things of that nature. So one of the things you want to consider is your overall user experience with that. So just like with a website, when you think of user experience, it's kind of the thought of you prioritize what matters most, and that is upfront and clear to the user. You maintain consistent elements, whether that's design elements or the tone and voice of the content that you're sharing. You want to make sure you're consistent across all your pieces. You're featuring predominant calls to action. Again, our calls to action is what do we want them to eventually do? The end goal of our communication is to X. We want to make sure that that's clear and they have an easy way to get that done. If we're using things like online forms, we want to make sure that we're keeping things as simple as possible, not having too many extraneous elements in there that they don't need to fill out in order for us to begin to start dialogue with them. We don't want to overwhelm people with too much content. And then nowadays, a lot of focus is on accessibility, especially in the nonprofit space, accessibility within that communication. So, for example, websites, making sure that we are meeting accessible requirements. That could be things like metadata that communicates back to visually impaired. It could be contrast between elements to make sure that it's legible on screen, the size of the type on a mobile device, things like that. So we want to make sure that we're hitting all those things in the user experience. Moving on, then you have to consider your mobile responsiveness. You know, how is all that information that we're trying to communicate out being received on mobile? Mobile is probably growing to almost 90% of the daily communication. As you're checking your email on your phone, you're clicking links that are taking you to places on your phone, you're checking text messages. A lot of the interaction is now happening on mobile. So you want to make sure that if it's a website, the entire website looks clean, clear, and works beautifully on mobile devices, regardless if it's an iOS device, an Android device, or whichever browser that they're using. Touch-friendly navigation, right? Emails that are going out, reformat beautifully into mobile. Legible fonts, and making sure that that works across all devices. So things of that nature are extremely important as more and more people are using their mobile as their primary device. Then we go on to content clarity. And where we go with content is really making sure that we can communicate, again, from that user experience, prioritize what matters most, and make it clear and understandable. We want to make it digestible information. We don't have to have, you know, a lengthy explanation of what we do. We want to make it quick and to the point, as people have about 15 seconds of attention span before they move on to anything. Thanks to the TikTok generation, right? So we want to use storytelling, but we want to have it digestible. We want to leverage tools like video as often as possible to be able to have some more digestible content there, and then maintain the navigation. If you're looking at something like a website, making sure your navigation is clear, because that not only helps the user go through the journey of what your website is and helps them achieve the goal that you eventually want them to achieve, but that also leads into SEO and helps Google understand how your website and content is structured, categories, and everything else. So even your navigation on your website could help that performance on the SEO side. In addition to that, making sure that your images are have the metadata in there to communicate. Again, accessibility is a big deal, so make sure that we're doing that. We're internally linking to cross content across your existing site. So if you have a particular article or blog talking about a particular service that your nonprofit helps with, we want to be able to link back to content to find more of that on your site. So cross-linking across your internal site is important in that regard. And then we'll go into some visual identity with Ty. That's his expertise.
Yeah, so some other stuff just that we would want to review in terms of your brand wellness is, of course, what people are digesting from what they're seeing, right? So first we start with logos. Does your logo stand out? Simple question, right? But a lot of logos are maybe too busy or too simple. So how does the design help convey your message and your mission? A bland or banal logo is a missed opportunity, right? Because sometimes that's all they're seeing. A confusing logo can actually be harmful because it gives people a bad feeling about your brand. Furthermore, color schemes are important. Many of you guys might know about how fast food restaurants are often colored red, orange, and yellow because they know that those color combinations kick our appetite into overdrive, you know. Conversely, there's another color combination that quells our appetite, which is purple and green. So, you know, you're not going to see many restaurants with purple and green logos. And if they are making them, I mean, if they are using those colors, then they're making a huge mistake, right? Furthermore, typography within your logo, and then however you're using it on your website or your other communication pieces. I mean, this can make or break your brand. Again, it's crucial to present your brand as professional and capable. That means the space between the letters we call kerning. If there's kerning gaps or dated typefaces, this is going to make you guys look or your brand appear unserious or ineffective. And like Adrian touched on, visibility and legibility are a huge issue. It's important for a type to be legible at a variety of sizes and media placements, right? Is it too busy for a quick read? When you think of a billboard, basically almost all ads now, especially social media ads, are all billboards now. So you get about 1.5 seconds to make an impression. And because people are just already scrolling by, you know, they just can't wait to scroll to the next thing. So in order to arrest them, we need to be clear and quick. So also, as Adrian mentioned, we want to have coherence across all the platforms. So your design language matters. It's very beneficial to be recognizable. If people are used to seeing a certain typeface with you and a certain color palette with you, then they can recognize you in an instant, and they don't have to relearn who you are and how you're presenting yourself. So the design aesthetic of your website should also be reflected in your presentation decks. Marketing pieces outside of that also should look like your website, or they should all look alike. Your advertising and even internal communication should all adhere to a strict design standard that identifies the brand. And this also, furthermore, is true with your copy strategy. You know, what is the voice you're using to communicate with your audience? Is the tone consistent? If you start off being serious and your copy is filled with jokes, you know, or a cavalier attitude, or vice versa, this is going to confuse the reader, and then we're going to lose their trust. That leads into our next section, the messaging analysis. Okay, so what about your mission statement? Is it clear? So we want people to understand your nonprofit's mission, right? We want them to get it. We want them to understand, to always know what it is. So let's do our best to keep these things short, sweet, and to the point. And this is also an opportunity to showcase your brand's personality traits, which, if you're doing it right, will shine through in all your various communication pieces. We want to look for consistency with your voice and your tone. You know, establishing your brand personality and brand attributes are key factors to know before we start communicating with our audience. So I'm going to say that again: your brand personality and your brand attributes. You know, you to establish the way you communicate with people through your personality, and combining that with the things about your brand that are special to your brand are absolutely crucial to have these kind of sorted through and identified before we to any real communication, right? Because we don't want to have conflicting messaging. So then when we're considering our audience, we want to know what motivates their headspace, their logic centers, and then what pulls at their heartstrings. So we want to attack them from those two fronts. It's important to establish these before you even start trying to communicate. So all our messaging is linked, sensical, and consistent. Which brings us to social media strategy. Now, this should be in line, of course, with all the things that we've mentioned already, consistent messaging and consistent design. One thing to remember is the purpose of social media is to be social, right? People might forget that. It seems obvious, but are you being engaging? Are you getting only 1 to 3 likes on your post and that's it? Or are you opening and creating a dialogue for your community? And that teases something else. Creating a dialogue for your community to talk about your subject matter on their own is just a wonderful thing that your brand can achieve. So we want to be able to foster that. Next up, storytelling approach. Again, consistency. How are you telling the story of your brand and its vision? Are we keeping our brand personality traits in mind? Is it consistent across all channels? Are you utilizing all media in an effective manner? So what does that mean? It means that even though we want to be consistent across channels, our different channels have different purposes. You know, what we're saying in a social media piece doesn't need to be exactly the same thing that we're saying in a direct mail piece or a press release or a brochure. We want to consider the vehicle and its strengths and weaknesses and then apply our message to that.
And then you don't want to forget about, other organizations that are out there. So we call it competitive positioning, where you actually take a look at the ecosystem and you kind of map other organizations that might have similar missions to you. So you kind of understand your own space involved. It might be that your organization has a geographical element to it. It may be that it's a national element to it or international element to it. But searching out those other organizations could be helpful because you may be able to find something that they are doing effectively that maybe you haven't thought of. Another area is that you might find potential gaps that are not being taken, and you're able to leverage your brand a little bit further there. So some differentiation really kind of sets up like what is your brand voice and your brand personality that helps you stand out from other organizations. So this is, to Ty's point, this is kind of, planting your flag and staking your ground. How are you going to act that sets yourself up in a unique way so that you could share your benefits and what we call a unique selling proposition, or USP, to kind of differentiate yourself from that competitive set. So even if it's in a crowded space, your mission will matter. Then current sector trends, a lot of things that kind of keep in mind is how quickly technology is changing the space with digital fundraising, peer-to-peer innovations, and then of course just some basic data analysis is where there's a lot of information to be found and uncovered, from anything from Google Analytics all the way to other business improvement opportunities. Now, one of the other things here is beyond tech and beyond just the vehicles themselves. One of the things we need to consider in terms of trends is the generational differences between each upcoming generation that's participating within your mission. So what motivates Gen Z versus motivates a baby boomer or Gen X or whomever it may be now versus what's coming in behind it. So as an example, baby boomers, they want transparency, they want accountability, they want to see that if they're making monetary donations, they want to see that it's being effective. Generation X are more likely to serve on boards and committees to kind of help plan. Millennials are more engaged through online tools, and Gen Z has more of an advocacy for hands-on involvement right now. So it's like, how do we communicate to each one of those in the way that they want to be communicated to help motivate them to take the action that you want them to take? Then as we kind of go through some brand assessment pillars, so these are kind of like thoughts of like, all right, great, we've talked about a number of different things to keep in mind of what your brand should do, but what do I need to do in order to take a look at my own brand? So this might be starting off with a simple website audit. So this can be something that you just go through the website with a fresh pair of eyes, and it's time to kind of reveal, like, has content been updated lately? Is everything, to the point that we made earlier, is it consistent visually, and is the functionality easy to get to? Can I access it from mobile devices? All those other little things that we were kind of talking about before. Your website is one area that you're going to want to take a look at. A second area you're going to want to look at is stakeholder feedback. So you don't want to be operating in a bubble or in a vacuum. You want to be collecting input from your donors, your volunteers, your staff, and get an understanding of how your brand is actually perceived versus how you think it's perceived. So this is valuable to make sure that, yes, even though we think we're the best at XYZ, the communication that comes back to you will affirm that, or will give you some food for thought in terms of what you might need to make adjustments to. Your social media, that's becoming bigger and bigger, obviously, and it's not going away anytime soon. But your presence, are you on the right channels? Are you on the right platforms to actually hit your donors or beneficiaries, depending on who you're talking to? What content is actually resonating with those people that's gone beyond a passive like into more of an engaged dialogue that Ty was talking about? Then there's email. Email marketing is still a big part of a nonprofit. So assessing your performance on email, beyond just open rates, but looking at the different segments. Are you breaking out your audience segments effectively? Are you communicating their wants and needs to them as they've defined it? Have you optimized your subscriber list based off of your opt-outs? You know, as we talked with the generation gaps, they may want different types of communication coming to them. So have you looked at that? That's another opportunity there to make sure that we're hitting the right people with the right message. Then it's when to kind of understand of what you want to handle internally versus externally. You know, with your team, a lot of nonprofits that we've worked with have limited resources, and sometimes they have to bring in an outside perspective because of limited resources. Sometimes they want an outside perspective just because they want a fresh eyes on things. So sometimes you may be too close to kind of see it. Sometimes you may just need extra hands to kind of help you take a look at that. But either way, you know, it's up to your individual organization to really determine, like, how do we handle it, and who helps us handle that.
Right. So some of you guys might be thinking that you want to handle that internally, and if you have the staff and the expertise, that's probably the right way to go. And for those of you who don't, that's where AdLab could step in. So as we talked about at the very beginning, we worked with Vince to create this comprehensive assessment for nonprofits. It's a wellness check. We're not going to go into the details of it here, but it's basically we can review all the things that we discussed today with your nonprofit, and then come up with a list of recommendations. We have a PDF that we're going to use, kind of like a leave behind for y'all today. So maybe if I can't figure out how to do that within this Google Meet, Vince can email you guys the PDF.
Yeah, most definitely. And you know, that wellness check, you know, you get we talked about, you know, what would I want from a wellness check? I want a full report that really gives me the good, the bad, the ugly, and maybe a plan out of the whole. And so, you know, many people haven't ever worked with a professional ad folks, and we know the environment's constantly changing. You guys said a lot about just a ton of stuff. Like one of the words you used was communication pieces at the beginning, and I wrote down that, you know, you do have a website, you do have social media, and then you have a newsletter, and you can get metrics all around those. And I was out at a horse ranch nonprofit just a few weeks ago, and they had a social media guy on staff, and he talked about the power of putting collaborator on a Instagram post. So they have a collaborator with, you know, hundreds of thousands of followers, and because you can attach them to a post, it can automatically boost that post way up to many more eyeballs. And so when you're talking about,
Yeah, and Vince, that's where kind of things like your generational gaps come into play, right? So
right,
if you're really focused on like reaching millennials and reaching Gen Z, that's really effective on that, because that's where they're sharing that platform. That's who they trust, are those collaborators, because that's what they see. And then if you're looking at like a baby boomer generation, that's probably the least of the instances where that makes sense. But you never know. It really depends, again, on what your audience profile looks like.
yeah, thank you for chiming in. You know, when you talked about competitive positioning, Adrian, a lot of times people can look at that like it's negative, it's all red forces, but you know, it's blue and red forces. You know, you got a bunch of military folks here, and there's people you're going to see in the landscape and the environment that could be potential friendly foe and collaborators, and like, hey, I got this and you got this. Let's post together and let's have a collaborative approach to social media. We have some nonprofits that like maybe never got brutal feedback. I guess we have clients because we're willing to give brutal feedback sometimes. Like for example, the nonprofit who has the name and you don't even know what they do. And is that a true liability? But like the way Ty was talking about it, if I have a name and you don't know what I'm doing, but then my logo kind of says what I'm doing, and then my tagline or mission, it really says what I'm doing, maybe I am kind of luring them into understanding me more. Um, have you advised people to just outright change their name? Because it's like, I don't know what you do. Because you guys are the ad lab. I know what you guys do.
Right. So what you don't want is to have a large number of steps that the audience has to take to figure out what you're all about, right? The fewer the better. So sometimes you just can't change the name. And so, like you mentioned, Vince, a tagline could help get that job done. But it is an extra step, you know, if it's the name and then there's a mark that goes with the logo that's supposed to explain what they do. I mean, how far away is that mark from the name, and how much you expect, you know, how much is the audience expected to jump and leap to put these pieces together? So, you know, if it's a large leap, then we've got a problem. But if it's kind of easy, then it's probably fine.
Yeah.
And there's
And
also instances where you run into an organization that's named after, you know, a family member or things of that nature. It's not going to come across our mind at that point to really recommend a name change. You know, I mean, it's really well known what the Michael J. Fox Foundation does with Parkinson's, but you know, even if it was a lesser known name, it may not be our place to make that recommendation.
great point. We have the Hardwick Foundation, and that is Jim and Jody Hardwick. And I really pushed on them about their name. They're building a dental clinic, and they're actually in Kenya right now cleaning teeth and filling cavities. And they created a children's book called Smiles Across the Savannah. So now there's a tagline at least that says, hey, we create smiles in the savannah. So that's one example too that I have. My final point here is like for social media, you said it's a town square. It's, you know, people are talking and it's social. Great point, Ty. Um, on Thursday, we're going to talk about board members and really onboarding board members. Like, what can I do? Like, I don't even know the mission. Like, we onboard them with fully knowing the mission, but then it's like, hey, you can do something. You can get on social media and you can have that conversation. You have full autonomy to dialogue with people and get them excited about our mission. So please comment and talk. And so we, you know, that'll be something that we talk to our nonprofit leaders, say, look, get your board involved in the social square. So that's my final point, and a commercial for Thursday for the nonprofit leaders, where we are going to fully we've had a lot of people talk about like, how do I get more board members? How do I learn, how do I get them onboarded? How do I like give them fundraising 101? So we're going to talk about that with board members on Thursday. And Toby or Ricky, do you have any questions? Not sure why Toby can't be heard.
Look, guys, do you have questions later? And when Vince sends out our
Can you hear
document.
me?
Oh, now we.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, Toby, we heard you.
So I was just going to say, if any questions arise later, Vince will have our contact info in that email, and you guys can email either Adrian and I or both of us directly, and we're happy to answer any questions you might have.
Great, and I'll get that flyer out to folks. I think it's your earplugs because when you took them out, we could hear you.
Okay, how about now?
Yes.
Go ahead.
I will say this. I understand everything you said. I don't want to do any of it personally. Because it's just, if I did that, I wouldn't do anything else, right? Because I understand the intricacies of how involved you have to be. So, yeah, like you guys do what you do because you like it. And I'm not saying I don't like it. It just like, it's so involved that it takes too much time for me as an executive.
And yeah, that's where it kind of comes up to the decision within each organization of like, if you have the resources and you have the time commitment to be able to execute that, then that's all great. But, and if you don't, that's where, folks like us come to play, and not just to toot our own horn, but, there's resources out there to help you. It really just depends on what type of resource do you need, and what specifically, if there's an area that you're looking for, or if you're looking wholeheartedly to try to get it done, how do you approach it? And that's where we come in and help. Or you kind of say like, oh man, I just got to get it done myself. How's that work out? And you realize, no, I don't want to do it. Then let us help.
Yeah, because like the Google ad things, I understand how to do Google ads. But it's like, okay, how effective am I at it, and how much time is it going to cost me?
Yeah, and
That's
if you're
the biggest.
getting the grant, right, that's a completely, they essentially treat it as a separate platform. So if you're spending dollars and then you have the grant, you're essentially running two different platforms as well.
I didn't realize that. I didn't know it was two different platforms.
Yeah, they keep them separate, for the most part. I don't think I've seen them where they blend them.
Okay. Yeah, and learn something every day, right?
Well, we were told that Google ad grants were to fill unsold space, so that it was like you were the second fiddle. But maybe it is two separate things, and they just kind of have spots for nonprofits kind of along the path of people scrolling. But man, I tell you, we could do a whole class on Google Ads because we have an entirely clueless population. I know Ricky and I speak with folks all the time about that. Ricky, did you have any insights from your military spouse perspective and all the clients you work with on brand, or how small businesses need to take a look at this?
I think a lot of businesses have to take the time to kind of determine not only like what their mission is, but also Ty and Adrian, you both brought up the fact of color, right? So I recently sat down with another military spouse who's trying to figure out what the colors told her or what emotion she felt at the colors that she was looking at to determine what really fit with the mission of what she was trying to do with her business. And I think that piece is very hard. Ty, you brought up, red and yellow colors specifically for food, right? So you'll see a lot that military spouses in entrepreneurship circle or realm really try to avoid those colors just because they're also so overly used, right? So trying to figure out, okay, what that color does tell me, how much is it used and will it really work in what I'm trying to get accomplished. So it's really a lot more involved than people realize, and it does take some time, and it's trying to find that right balance, right? Of, do I have enough time to really clarify and make sure everything fits and meshes well, on top of trying to make sure that, I'm spending enough time that I need to do in order to get the organization up and functioning started just from a business perspective. So a lot of kudos for what you do, because I do think it is very time consuming from that perspective.
Yeah, many kudos. Their website is adlabllc.com, and they have a ton of case studies and past work. And I really love the colorful nature of what you guys do and what you've done and what you can do. It's not often that people can have access to professionals like this, where for a low rate, like say $999, you're gonna like do a full workup and like A to Z, like give the good, the bad, the ugly in a report, and then a plan to get out of it. And so I think this is a great way to have access to experts. And people say AI is like transforming industries. Garbage in to AI equals garbage out. And experts, you guys using AI, that's expert in equals great recommendations out, even, and you can just help more people with AI because you're an expert and you know how to use AI. But we try to use AI, and I try to be a critical, strategic, creative thinker with AI. I get a lot out of AI, but I also know that when it comes to revamping a brand, I want to bring in an expert. And I'm really thankful that we've been able to like really stimulate some insights here today, but also try to get some expertise out to folks that could really use it. So thanks for your time today. We're right at 45 minutes, and that's kind of what I was hoping for. So appreciate your time, guys, today, and we'll be in touch for sure.